Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening. Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg. I am your host for Yoga Birth Babies, and today we have one of my all-time favorite people on the podcast. This is her third visit to Yoga Birth Babies, Miss Terry Richmond. She is a labor support doula with over 800 births under her belt. She's a childbirth educator and all-around amazing person, and I am beyond thrilled to speak with her yet again. In this podcast, we talk about birth plans or birth preferences, what you might want to think about putting on a birth preference plan, and maybe how to talk to your care provider, how to advocate for yourself, how to have your birth posse advocate for you, things maybe you didn't think to add to your birth preferences, just a really all-around good conversation for anyone approaching birth. Also really good for someone that's maybe even a newer doula or childbirth educator to start to pick Terry's brain because she has so much knowledge. I will say, just keep in mind there's a few little spots where the sound gets just a little bit off. So if you can just kind of push through those little blurbs of spots where it's a little bit off, Terry's information is fantastic. So again, just a few spots. I suspect that her microphone might have rubbed against something. So you hear just some odd spots, but still a great podcast. What else? So if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider subscribing to our podcast, as well as leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to your podcast. And then lastly, I have been working like a little busy bee to relaunch Who's Afraid of the Pregnant Yogi. That will come out in end of October. And that is helping me pave the way for my new online course called Teaching the Postnatal Student. So if you are someone that enjoys continuing education, you actually get Yoga Alliance education, what do they call it? The education. Continued ed? Yeah, continued ed units. You can join those. Who's Afraid of the Pregnant Yogi is for the yoga teacher that may not be well-versed in prenatal, and you have a pregnant student come into your class. You may think, oh my God, now what do I do? This gives you that information. And same with on the other side, teaching your postnatal student. So stay tuned for those. Okay, we're going to take a super quick break. And when we come back, enjoy my chat with Terry. Every year for my kid's birthday, my mom makes them a photo album of the pictures I sent her throughout the year. And it's fantastic and really a win-win for everyone because I am particularly horrible about executing and organizing projects like this. Now, even though my mom's the one doing the work of making the album, I still have to get her the pictures. And as a busy working mom, sometimes I find that task overwhelming. But this year, I think things are going to be different because I found a free photo sharing app. It's called Family Album. With Family Album, it has been so easy to share photos. I decide who I want my photos shared with, and every time I upload a new picture, my invited guests get a notification that new memories have been added. No more texting pictures, no more trying to shove as many pictures into one email. It has become so streamlined. Organization's also incredibly easy with Family Album since it sorts the pictures by the month taken and tells me how old my kids are in each picture. So when I'm trying to get my mom pictures for the album, I can see, all right, I've got some in November, I've got some in December, I've got some in January. Organization's so much easier. I actually wish I had this app when I was pregnant so I could have watched my pregnancy evolve and seen how my belly grew. Instead of what I have is just some random pictures and actually not knowing where in my pregnancy I was. My kids also love Family Album because of the 1-second movie highlights. Every 3 months, a short video collage is created using the best photos and video clips I have shared. They love seeing themselves in these movies, and I love seeing how much they've changed in just 3 months. And Family Album also offers free unlimited storage. I kid you not when I say I have over 5,000 pictures taking up storage on my phone and computer. By saving them on the Family Album app, I have freed up so much space on my devices, which has been a huge help. And did I mention all these great features and convenient photo sharing opportunities is completely free? Free. Family Album, you can find it through your favorite app store or search Family Album on Google. And remember, Family Album is all one word, so hurry up and go get this free app. Start sharing your memories with the people that you love.
This podcast is sponsored by Skylight Calendar. Let's be real. Running a household can be exhausting and chaotic. And finding the perfect Mother's Day gift, it's not exactly a no-brainer. Until now. The Skylight Calendar is the best way to organize the family and give everyone, especially mom, some peace of mind to enjoy the things that matter most. The Skylight Calendar is a smart, touchscreen calendar that keeps track of and manages the chores, dinner planning, groceries, and to-dos for the whole family. The Skylight Calendar automatically syncs each family member's digital calendars and displays them all together on one color-coded touchscreen. It even doubles as a digital picture frame, so you can finally share all those special moments that are just sitting on your phone. As a limited-time offer for our listeners, get 15% off your purchase of a Skylight Calendar when you go to skylightcal.com/easy. That's SKYLIGHTCAL.com/easy. Get 15% off your Mother's Day purchase now at skylightcal.com/easy.
Terry, I think this is your third podcast. I know, we've gotten so fancy. I think the first two, we were in your apartment sharing a microphone, and look at us. We can do it via Skype now. Yay. How are you?
I won't tell anyone.
You're in your pajamas? Well, I'm in my yoga clothes, so there there we go, with unwashed hair and my cat sitting next to me and several beverages. So this is just how I like to do it. Talk to me. How are you?
I'm great. I've had a wonderful month of diverse birth experiences, and I'm looking forward to heading to Wisconsin to help a friend give birth, which will be really fun for me because I do so much birth in New York City. And whenever I leave town to do a birth, I learn a lot, and I get to have a very different experience, non-New York City experience, which usually means calmer. But labor is still labor, so it's a really fun thing to go out of town.
When do you leave?
Well, I leave. It depends when my second timer due in early October delivers. As soon as she delivers, I head out, so I can be there waiting. So
that's exciting.
Sometime in October.
So
that's the life of a doula.
It is. I know. It's a challenge. That's actually something I don't miss from the doula world is the schedule. So I kind of cornered you to do yet another podcast. So this time we're going to cover birth plans. And as I was saying before we officially started, I know, so you were, full disclosure, you were my mentor from when I started my doula-ship or doula world to doulahood. And then you were the doula for both my kids. And as I was writing up these questions and thinking about birth plans, and I'm sure we had prenatal meetings, but I couldn't remember at all. And I couldn't remember you asked. And I know that we did talk about this kind of stuff. So I just feel like with your vast knowledge of births, how many has it been at this point?
I don't know. Lately, I've been saying over 800. I think it's closer to 1,000, but I just feel like that number is so weird that I kind of like 800.
And for the next few years, you'll stick to that.
Yeah, I'm not a meticulous note keeper, so it's a lot. Let's say that.
You've seen a lot of variation, and you've been with a lot of people laboring, a lot of different types of couples. So you have seen a lot about not just the birth, but how people plan for their births and what they think about. So even when I call it birth plans, I like to think of like birth preferences, so we don't get too attached. I guess let's start with, I know a lot about you, but tell the rest of us a bit about you and how you got started in this birth world.
Okay. I was an actress before. Actually, I was on Broadway when I got pregnant with my beautiful son, Emery. And it was a few years ago because he's just gone back for his second year of college. Anyway, I was a Vermonter and a yoga teacher and an actress, and I consider myself pretty groovy. And so I thought when I got pregnant that I wanted to have an unmedicated natural birth. And what that was based on was sort of just this idea that I thought of who I was. It wasn't based on any knowledge of what labor or birth was because I had none. And as I started to read and research and talk to people, and I was probably quite diseased with a desire to like read and take in everything. I recognized that I couldn't believe that I was my age and educated and purposely pregnant and knew so very, very little, right? It was shocking to me that I had kind of no relationship to this gigantic event and this transition and who I was as a person, as a woman, all of that. So I also didn't really like what was going on politically, in America with birth. I also was offended that my insurance company got to dictate that said, oh, we're not going to cover this birth center. We'll only cover this. We'll only cover. I found my lack of choice kind of shocking, especially in New York City. So I became pretty political, I would say. And right after my son was born, I trained to teach childbirth ed. And I was kind of on a track of a fairly didactic, birth person, expectations for what birth should be. And very, very fortunately, I stumbled into a birth doula training with the lovely Deborah Pascali-Bonaro. Mm-hmm. And she very rightly and very quickly in the birth doula training said, hey, we're not here to tell people how to give birth. We're here to help them have the birth that is the right birth for them, where they feel safest, where they feel happiest, where they feel most comforted, where they get the care that feels appropriate to them. And that was really eye-opening, and I got it because I really did just want to nurture people. But also I recognized as I started attending births that there was just no way to tell people how to do it or that I had any handle on what to expect for their experience because everybody was going to experience labor differently. Everyone was going to have a different labor. People were going to be in different environments laboring. So, very quickly I realized I didn't know anything, which is always useful when you're trying to help people. But, hundreds and hundreds of births later, I've learned where I can help. And also I've watched things evolve in the hospitals, in the birth centers, at home. I've watched people's goals and needs and wishes. I've watched how we educate women change, all of that, and found my way. And I continue to be, I believe, provide very importantly non-judgmental support for all choices. I take clients who are having scheduled C-sections. I take clients having home births. I take everything in between. I believe that we need to meet people where they are. To me, dispelling fear around this beautiful event is a profoundly important part. And you can't dispel fear by telling people what they're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. So, I guess that is, in my head, a brief overview of how I got here.
Wonderful. And people can listen to something very similar on the other two podcasts, which I'll make sure we link to.
You just cut and paste.
So one of the things, again, I want to talk really about the birth plans because I think a lot of students I talk to, I start to unfold in class, all these options. And it was really interesting. I taught a childbirth class over the weekend and we started to talk about pushing positions. And she said, she's like, well, if you don't push on your back, how else do you push? I'm like, oh, interesting. Mm-hmm. So I just think people don't realize that there are options. So when you're working with clients, either as a doula or teaching group classes, how do you even approach the topic of birth plans and preferences?
I want to answer that question, but I have to back up for half a second too,
sure.
If you don't push on your back, because the woman that I refer to as my mentor, who I know had on your podcast, Deborah,
yes,
she does grand rounds in the hospital with new residents, trying to help them understand how women's bodies and how birthing people would deliver babies and what other alternatives there are to laying on your back. She says to them, okay, if you think that on your back with your legs held up by, friends and family is a great way to deliver, then next time you're super constipated, I want you to call some friends over, get up on your dining room table, shine a spotlight, have them hold your legs and cheer for you while you're on your back with them holding your legs and see if that works, right? So just to say, intuitively, I think that people are drawn to positions other than on their back with their legs up. But clinically, and this is perfect for talking about birth preferences, clinically, the staff, the doctors and midwives want you where they want you in case they need to do something, right? So it doesn't have to be a conflict, but it does sometimes need to be a negotiation.
Yes, and during labor is not the time to have that negotiation.
Yeah, ideally it's not. So back to your question, which is how do we start the conversation with our care providers? Now I've already lost track.
All right, so when you're with your clients or classes, and some people don't even realize they have options, they just think, okay, I just walk in and they tell me what to do. How do we approach the topic or even empower people to think about there are options? And I guess I like the word plans, but I don't. Like plans can go awry. And so more like, again, preferences or ideas.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on chumbacasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at chumbacasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's chumbacasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, you know, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at chumbacasino.com. That's chumbacasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
I think preferences is absolutely the word to use. I think that's, you don't have options unless you realize you have them. So it does start with education, right? It starts with either taking a class, reading a book, going online, talking with a lot of friends. What did they like about their experiences? What didn't they? Finding an expert to advise you. Any of those things can help you to sort through where you actually have choice. And there's tons of information out there, and there's different ways to access it. So that is where I would start. Like Birth 101, what happens at the hospital? What do I have to have? What do I not have to have? I think, you do have to have some idea of what excites you and what you wish to avoid before you can even begin to formulate a conversation with your care provider, right? So some education is absolutely essential. Otherwise, it's a free-for-all. But the other thing is, of course, you could start with your care provider and ask them, what does it look like? What are you going to do? How do you handle this? And then do some research from there. Either way is good, but it's going to take a little bit of learning to have a sense of what you want, I think. It also is going to be personal, right? You're going to hear about IVs or how they monitor you or pain management and your options there, and you're going to have reactions to that. And this sounds good to me. This doesn't sound good, right? So in terms of approaching a care provider, I think it's really important, a couple things that are important. One is if I am in my pregnancy and I'm not convinced that the care provider I've chosen is the right fit for what are becoming my goals, I want to have a conversation about my preferences as soon as possible. Because if I find that I want a birth of a very specific type, that would be my ideal, and I have a care provider who is really going to go a different direction, right, is going to induce me much earlier than I would like, is going to intervene after a very short period of time, it has very strict protocols, for instance, I might decide that care provider is a bad fit for my goals and choose a different one. Right. So a birth preferences conversation, at least some part of it may happen earlier in the relationship with the care provider, because if it doesn't happen till 36 weeks, it's a lot harder to change care providers. You still can, but it's harder. So typically, though, if I know that I'm happy with my care provider, it's not unusual for the doctors and midwives to say, hey, a 36-week appointment, we're going to have this discussion. We can talk through what you're expecting. I can tell you what I'm expecting, and we can kind of just make a plan / preferences together. Right? It's important that you make some time for the conversation. So here's another mistake people make is they walk into their next appointment because they just had class and they sit down for the 2 minutes that have been allotted by their doctor, and not their doctor's fault, insurance company's fault, or whoever, healthcare problem. Doctors have 2 minutes for you, and you have, just only 10 questions, right? That conversation is not going to go well. So what I recommend is you call the front desk ahead of time. Hey, next appointment, we'd really like to talk to our doctor about our preferences. Would there be time for that, or should we make a separate appointment? So set the stage for a real conversation. It's still only going to be 20 minutes. You still want to be concise, but that's going to go a lot better than, hey, I'm already an hour and a half behind schedule. And I can answer one question, but I'm not answering 12. So make time for that conversation and call ahead and make sure you're honoring their time as well. And that's going to be more productive, right? If I am writing a written birth plan, and we'll, I guess, get into that more, what I recommend for that conversation is that you have your written birth plan preferences, your hopes, right? What you would like, all things being ideal. This is what I would like my birth to be, and guidelines for it. I bring 2 copies to that meeting. I have my doctor or midwife sign it, put one in my chart, and give me one signed copy that I then make copies of to take to the hospital. Then I have, they might have made some notes on it, but then I have, look here, right? Going to worries about who are you going to interact with at the hospital? Who are you going to give this to, right? How is it going to be honored if it's just this piece of paper? We could get more into that.
Yeah, actually, can we jump there? I know I'm kind of jumping ahead, but that is something that many people experience, especially in the practices here. I'm just referring to the class I did a couple days ago. And one of the students, there's 10 people in the practice she signed up with. So I gave her the idea. I'm like, have your doctor sign off and put in your charts what you taught me. But she was concerned. She's like, well, that's all well and good, but what if whoever's there kind of disregards that? So what would you say to that?
Right. First of all, not only do I have it signed off or not, but I have it, and it may or may not be honored. And I would say just because a birth preferences is written or is in your chart doesn't mean it will be honored. So I think of it more as like a guide sheet for the partner to help them remember things and check in and say to the nurse, what about, this is our birth preferences, can you help me? Right. So it's that. I think whether you have a written birth plan, because there are definitely practices that resist them. So there are times where we don't do any writing. We just get verbal agreements. Whether you have it written or verbally agreed on, it is important to have that conversation ahead of time so that in the moment I can super warmly, as the partner, for instance, not in my role as doula, I'm pretending to be a partner now. I can say, when I talked to your partner, Dr. So-and-so, they said it wouldn't be a problem, right? And I can do that very warmly and very positively so that I have the best hope of getting them to honor the agreements that were made to you prenatally, right? Because if a practice is not philosophically in tune with each other, that's problematic, but it should be your problem, right? And so the best we can do is to say, I talked to your partner, we were hoping to do this. And you can have a response from that new doctor saying, sure, no problem. Or I know they like to do that, but this is why I like to do it this way. Or I know they said that, but we're having a clinical reason that we have to do it differently, right? But at least there's a discussion around it, if not an honoring of it. Because nothing is going to be done automatically anyway, and everything needs to be in the guise of really a lot of warmth. I've had times where I've sort of fudged where a doctor didn't necessarily give permission for something, and we'll say, we talked to Dr. So-and-so about it, and the nurse goes back to check on the off chance that the new partner we have is a little more flexible, right? Yeah, we did talk to that doctor about it. They didn't say we could do it, but, So I think it just provides kind of the guideline for how we're going to then navigate the hospital. We don't know who will be there. Even if you only had one doctor, you're going to have nurses, you may have residents, PAs, you're going to interact with other people. And so to be able to say, I had spoken to my care provider and they said it would be fine to do this. I think that is a great way to not be confrontational, but more like, I'm seeking more information because, I'm new to this, right? I always want to play a little naive, but a little clear that we also prepared and we had ideas and we're wondering why we're deviating from those. Can you help explain that to me?
That's great. And then how in detail do you recommend people get with their preferences?
It's a great question because the more detail, kind of the worse, right? And
I've seen some really detailed, like during the birth, during the actual pushing, I want this music played. And I'm like, we'll do the best we can. So how detailed?
Listen, as a doula, I'm happy for all that. And that I'm happy to know what song to turn on. Like that I can totally do. But am I going to use up the time of the clinical care providers for such things? Am I going to muck up birth preferences with that? Absolutely not, right? Mm-hmm. So birth preferences should be bullets, should be brief. They should really interact with specific clinical guidelines, protocols at the hospital, at the birth center, and not be about what the room's going to smell like, what kind of lighting you're going to doing, that you're bringing your birth ball. When you say you want freedom of movement, you don't then need to list all the positions you want to take, right? I want to push in any position. Boom, that's it, right? And the more clear and succinct you can be, the better, because keep in mind, it's one thing when you're having this conversation prenatally, but when we're talking about using birth preferences document with anyone we interact with at the hospital, we're going to meet people in triage. We're going to have a new nurse, when we move to labor and delivery room, for instance, she's going to go on breaks. We're going to have a new nurse then. We're going to have possibly a baby nurse coming in at the last minute before birth. We're going to meet, residents, doctors, midwives. We interact with a lot of people. And nobody's going to sit and read a 4-page birth plan. They're going to look at what you give them and hope that they can really go through that and be respectful. And that is my experience, that most of the people at the hospital want to respect your birth plan. But they need it to be succinct, and there's no reason for it to go on and on, right? The other thing you don't need to do is argue why, like the studies show, like I don't need no episiotomy because the studies show. I just want no episiotomy on there, right? Remember that these are things that need to be succinct, but we're not re-arguing them. We're not talking about our feelings about them. We're simply requesting that all things being normal and good, this is what we would be aiming for. Right? And always with the understanding that if there's a clinical reason to deviate, of course, that's why you're there. That's why you have care providers, whether it's home or hospital or birth center, you have someone clinically in charge and you are respecting their decisions around that. So if there's a clinical need to deviate, that's different, right?
So that if you could narrow down, let's say 3 or 4 topics that you recommend are a must have either on the conversation before or on the birth preference chart, especially if they're going to be walking in, they don't necessarily know who the care provider will be or the nursing staff. What would those 3 or 4 topics be?
And it's probably not a mystery to your listeners that, you provided me with some questions you might ask ahead of time so I could think about it. And I thought about this one a lot, actually. And I think that's us doing a good job, right? But I thought about this one because my immediate response, and I'm still with it, is that it's not at all for me to figure out what the priorities are of anyone going into their birth, right? I think it really speaks to my theme about this, which is this is about your priorities. And going back to where we started, like I've done all these births, I've had all these experiences. What I know for sure is that different people have different priorities, right? What makes one person feel safe makes another person feel unsafe. I had a really curious, I think it is worth telling a quick story, experience of a client called me. She was with a solo care provider. He's out of network, very expensive, very attentive. And she called me and she was 36 weeks and she said, I think I have to leave my doctor. And I'm like, woo, okay, what's going on? And she said, he's just not clear enough. He's not telling me what to do enough. I'm just feeling really stressed about it. And meanwhile, just like 6 weeks before, I'd had someone with the same doctor, and she was very much in charge of her care. She constantly went out to get second opinions. She really loved and appreciated about this doctor that he just laid it out for her and didn't tell her what to do. He said, here's my clinical opinion, here are my options, here is the wiggle room I feel comfortable with, but yes, you can make decisions within that. And so what was fascinating to me was to have the exact same care provider and have one client who felt like, oh, this is exactly what I need, and another who was starting to be in a panic that kind of care and openness didn't serve her. She really wanted someone to tell her what to do. Guess what? they were each right. They were each speaking to their truth and their need and what made them feel safe. And so that's why when I think, oh, what are the priorities of the birth preferences? It's absolutely to the people who are going to be giving birth to decide that. And I think, but as a general, and we sort of covered this already, like, don't muck it up with stuff that is non-clinically important, like the music and the great lavender smell and all of these things, right? Like, make it very clear that the things you're going to interact with once you are in the birth environment, what are those going to be in terms of interactions with your care provider, with the nursing staff, with whatever staff is going to be around you. Obviously, home birth preferences, birth vision is very different as well, right? So
I'm going to push you a little further. First, there is the question I'm going to ask about what people forget, but I'm going to ask a little further. So when you're teaching a class, and again, so we're not going to go with the top 3 topics, and I get that because everyone has their own priority, but are there certain bullet points you want people to at least think about?
And I also, in regard to that question, I thought, okay, but let's just say, I've said this a lot in a hypothetical. If I met a doctor and I was only allowed one question, I wanted to get a sense of where they fell, doctor or midwife for that matter, where they fell on the spectrum of sort of, are they inclined to kind of hang back and trust a woman's body? Are they inclined to intervene, right? And that's something I'm always looking for. Where do they fall on the spectrum of, do they think they need to kind of run the show, or do they think they need to be there in case, right? Mm-hmm. If I only am allowed one question, it's always the episiotomy question, because if you find out what their episiotomy rate is, for the most part right now, it should be very low. And the response from doctors and midwives should be, oh, we do it rarely. Oh, it's no longer clinically indicated. Oh. But there are still practices who are like, sure, first-time moms, 80% of the time. That alone
it's very telling.
Run screaming. Yeah, very telling, right? So that is my kind of one go-to that speaks to me philosophically about, and of course, cesarean rates, right? You can definitely get a sense. And sure, a high-risk practice is going to have higher rates than a low-risk practice, but it's still something that can be very informative. The highlights of birth preferences, right? Are you going to wear your own clothes? Does that need to be on there? But I think that's a really important thing. I find more and more of my clients, when they go, oh, I don't have to wear the hospital gown, great. I think that they really, that speaks a lot to their comfort in this experience. And it also is surprisingly met with a lot of pushback at the hospital. So I think it can really bear being on the birth preferences, right? Oh, I got permission from my practice to wear what I want. It seems absurd, but it is meaningful. Whether you're going to have IV fluids, whether you can eat or drink, right? Can you have a HEP block or nothing, right? That is something that is going to be important to a lot of people. How they're going to monitor you and the baby. How much freedom of movement are you going to have? I think pushing positions, very important. I think talking about induction, very important, but not necessarily on birth preferences, because by the time you get to the hospital, you've either agreed to induction or not. Delivery position, highlighting the difference between pushing positions and delivery.
Yes.
Super important.
Can you go deeper into that? Because I think that people just hear pushing and delivery and put it together as one, but they're very different. And I've seen things take interesting turns.
Right. And so it is typical that when the baby has moved down, the birthing woman is feeling that urge to push, feeling like she has to poop. That is a time where they're going to check your cervix and say, oh, great, you're fully dilated. Cervix is totally out of the way. Let's push this baby out. Good for you. And while they're doing that cervical exam, women tend to be on their back with their legs up. Right? That is kind of the typical norm clinically for doing an exam. There are doctors and midwives who will check you in other positions, but most of the time you find yourself on your back with your legs up, and they say, great, give us a push. And this thus begins the pushing in the stranded beetle, we call it, stranded beetle position, which, listen, if you give 2 pushes and the baby is crowning, great, have your baby. But for the most part, especially for first-time moms, where we have an expectation that pushing is going to take a couple hours or more, being in one position, nevertheless one that works against gravity, is not ideal. right? And what we want to do for your pelvis and for your baby as they navigate the cardinal movements is make change and move about so that you can easily birth your baby. So moving during pushing, right? Getting in a new position. You remember you have a push and then you have a break, just like you have in the laboring part, contractions with breaks. For pushing, it's the same. You push during a contraction, you have a break. So I'm going to push in a position and then I have that 2-minute break to say, okay, now I want to go to my side. Now I'm going to go to hands and knees, and then I'm going to push in hands and knees. Taking time to do different pushing positions can truly make the difference between having that baby come down and out through the birth canal or needing to go for cesarean. So pushing in different positions is essential in many, many labors. And also, a woman who's medicated, epidural, she can still move about on the bed. She can still do these positions. And I would argue it's even more important because even though you feel a lot of pushing on our epidurals, you do have some reduced sensation and you want to push effectively. And pushing effectively means usually changing positions. So more than a half hour in any one position is not really useful. It's time to try something else. If you do 2 pushes in a position, you're like, I don't feel it. I've lost the urge. I'm confused. It isn't working. Try something else. But then what happens, hopefully, very hopefully, you've done a great job pushing. We've moved about the bed. We've gotten that head right to crowning, and we're really about to deliver the baby. Most kind of traditional care providers, most doctors, plenty of midwives in a hospital setting at least, are going to ask you, okay, baby's about to be born. Now I need you on your back with your legs up. Now we're back to stranded beetle. And the reason they're doing that is their clinical comfort, right? They need to know that if something is tricky with the cord, with the shoulders, that they are right there and that you are right where they want you. And that gives them clinical comfort. So there are a lot of people who are going to be able to move and push in any position. But when it comes time for delivering the baby, they will be required to be on their back with their legs up. And that is one of the compromises we make with a lot of our care providers. And, you know, I teach like that may be the compromise you need to make. Right. And if I go on too long, you're going to have to stop me, Deb.
No, this is, I love hearing this.
I have a really good brief story about it.
Oh, I know the story. Tell it.
It's a great story, right? I tell it always, and I won't tell the doctor's name because this could get out, but she's awesome. But anyway, this client had delivered, it was at Cornell Hospital. She delivered her first baby. It had gone very well, meaning, you know, it was about 8 hours start to finish. She wanted to go unmedicated, and she did. Pushing stage was not that long, maybe 45 minutes. So for a first timer, that was a beautiful birth in terms of ease clinically, right? I don't know if she'd say it was easy, but it did go well. Okay, so we come in with her second. She's laboring with her second. We come in very quickly. Seconds tend to go very fast, which is a blessing and a curse. And I help my client onto the bed where she's required to be, and she gets up hands and knees, which is a comfortable position for her. And I think of her as kind of locked down in that hands and knees pose because she was 8 centimeters, but I would say she was going to deliver in about 15 minutes. And that's a second baby. They just tend to fly out. It's a very intense experience. So, of course, she's on hands and knees, just all in focused, crazy animal mode. And I think, okay, I know this hospital. I know this doctor very well. The doctor had been present for this woman's first birth. I know that I love this doctor, but she likes to deliver, you know, in the traditional position. And I had this vision of trying to wrangle this poor woman over onto her back. And I thought, oh, I don't want to do that. You know, I just want to let this baby come out. So I turned to the doctor because I knew her so well. I could speak directly to her. I said, hey, would it be okay if she delivered on her hands and knees? And the doctor was like, sure, okay. And I was like, oh my gosh, great. I'm so pleased, right? And I'm back to attending to my client. And then the doctor calls me over like a little wave, way over. Cornell's rooms are big, right? We go way over behind the curtain now. She pulls me away from my client out of earshot. And she says, Terry, I've never delivered hands and knees before. And I mean, I was like so shocked you could have like, you know, had to over. Knocked me over. I was like, what? And my first instinct is, but can we please, you know? And she said, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for her because I really trust her pelvis. She said, you know, you and I were here last time. You know how this is going to go. I said, yeah, I do. She said, but I got to tell you, I'm a little freaked out. You know, it's upside down to everything I know. And all I could think was, wow, I am so grateful. I'm so grateful. But also, we can't ask our doctors to be clinically uncomfortable, right? We can't get away with that very often. The only reason she went there was she had such trust from the first labor. And so we do have to find these compromises, because if a doctor is not clinically comfortable, that's not great either. If something does occur that, heaven forbid, we need some intervention, we want them confident and safe. So to me, a lot of times the compromise is you can push in a position, you get to crowning, so we make sure that baby is coming out vaginally. And then for that last push, a lot of women are going to deliver on their back, which is not the end of the world, but it is a compromise with our clinical care providers. Now, the big Lamaze study on it to try to minimize tearing said that the best way for American women to deliver, and it matters that you're American because our culture doesn't squat all the time like other cultures, the best place for you to deliver and to minimize tearing is on your side.
I was going to ask about that. That's so funny that you brought that up, because I was going to say towards the end of my little doulaship, I did see people letting them take a slight tilt to the side, just a slight bit.
Yeah, and I think that's great, and it feels to me like a really reasonable compromise, and I can totally understand how it clears the perineum better. We're not coming up and over it. There would be less tearing. It all makes sense. The problem is, keep in mind, in most hospitals, again, at least that I work in, the bottom third of the bed is taken off. And they put your feet up out of the way. And if you are on your side, there's nowhere for that bottom leg to be. Yeah. So the doctors have to be willing to not break the bed, as it's called, take the bed part, which means they're a little further away. And so it does change it. It changes it. And I think it's why I want to have the conversation with my doctor ahead of time. I want to find out what's going to happen. I also, when I talk to my doctor or midwife ahead of time, I can say, what can I expect from your partners? That's a totally reasonable question. So that in the moment when pushing comes, as the laboring person, I can be like, I got to change positions. But most importantly, my partner, whoever is helping me, we can be reminding the staff. She wants to push in different positions. She wants to deliver. She was told she could deliver on her side. Can we do that? You want the room to do whatever makes sense for the woman who's pushing out the baby. And then, of course, we meet somewhere in the middle with our staff. What is making the midwives and the doctors comfortable? And then, of course, baby dictates a lot, right? If a baby's perfectly happy, heart rate's beautiful, they don't mind being pushed out, great, you have all that wiggle room. But if the baby is only comfortable with you in one position, obviously you're stuck in that position, and that's what's important and best for the baby.
I'm so glad you differentiated that, because a lot of people talk, pushing positions, but pushing and delivery can very much be different, and it's a conversation to have. I'm very excited about that. So,
what?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No,
I want to say, it made me remember my 3 questions, because this is a really important theme for birth preferences, for advocacy in your birth, for all of the communication during it. It can be really confusing, and we have a lot of details that you and I are really comfortable with. But if you are the partner to somebody and you've never attended a birth, you could easily be overwhelmed, whether it's all written down or not. And what I always go back to with my classes and my clients is, listen, here are your 3 questions, and it kind of covers everything.
Everything, right? Yeah, I know exactly what you're going to say.
Person okay? Is my wife, is my partner, is the woman person in labor okay, right? First and foremost. Also, is the baby okay, right? And if the answer to both of those is yes, then a great question is, can we have more time? And that takes care of a great deal of birth preferences. May we have more time? Because especially when we're looking at first labors, and we're looking at busy hospitals, a lot of the protocols are designed to sort of keep things moving and keep it working and get you through and get your baby out and all of that. And those don't necessarily serve you. So if the laboring woman is fine and the baby is fine, can we have more time? And I guarantee you, if there's anything clinical going on, they're not even talking to you. You can be saying as a partner, is the baby okay? Is the baby okay? They may not even answer you, because what they're doing is making sure your baby is okay, right? And that's where their focus should be. So anytime there's conversation, whether you have birth preferences listed or in your head or whatever, you can always ask that and always ask for more time. And my experience is that works really well.
Yeah, and absolutely. And it really, as you said, it covers so much. And it really highlights if something's not medically necessary, necessary at the moment. It highlights, well, then why are we pushing this? It gives you.
Why is there this energy around? Because sometimes the staff gets very worked up. And of course, new expectant parents are going to feel that and think something's wrong. No, they're just like, oh, we've got another delivery happening. We're busy on the floor today, right? It may have nothing to do with you, and your birth may be going beautifully, and they just want to get it done. Mm-hmm. baby out and meet the next one. And it's not their fault either. I'm not saying this as a criticism to anyone I interact with at the hospital. I think, the vast majority of the people that I get to work with in hospital, birth center, home birth are incredibly loving and caring and devoted to care. But they are under their own, constraints and protocols and subjected to all kinds of experiences that influence how they may be working with you, all kinds of things, right?
Yeah. So listeners, if you walk out with nothing else, those 3 questions, is mom okay? Or is laboring person okay? Is baby okay? Can we have more time? I wanted to also shift to, so we went over a few things that people might want to consider to add their birth preferences. Is there anything you see people that tend to avoid or forget that you think should be discussed?
I immediately, when I read that, thought about that question. I was like, here's a big problem. People don't think about cesarean.
That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say, because a lot of people would like to avoid it. And it's, I remember you and I talking about this. You're like, we have to have this talk and then we'll forget about it. We're just going to put it away, but let's have it, tuck it away.
What I say is it is something to prepare for, right? Because we want to make it a beautiful experience. It's still your birth. We want to make it as beautiful as possible. And it's not going to be beautiful if you have no idea what's going to happen, if you haven't prepared. But you can spend one bit of time where you read about it, you learn, you think about, you talk to your partner. What would you like it to be? What would you guys bring to it? Is it going to, what smells, what songs, how do you want to meet the baby? What can we ask of our care providers? A lot of great guidelines. Penny Simkin has some great suggestions about it. Do that conversation, do that preparation, and then, yes, put it away. But being in denial about cesarean does not make you avoid it. And it does mean that if it needs to happen, and hopefully if it happens, it's not an emergency. Keep in mind the vast majority of cesareans are not emergencies. Some of them are. It's an unpleasant experience if we're unprepared for it. So prepare and then put it away and go back to focusing on your ideal birth. But don't be in denial. Denial does not help. And, we want to know that, I want to hear from more people when they're talking to their doctors and midwives, hey, if it goes to cesarean, is there a clear drape? Can we do 1 minute cord delay? Will I get skin to skin in the OR? These are really important things to make that birth the most kind of connected and loving day you can have it be, right? And I think people are inclined also, there's the denial problem, and then there's also, and this happens with inductions as well, the kind of, oh, it's not what I wanted, so, right, I'm just going to give up, and now it's going to be awful. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's valuable either. The best thing we can do for birth is to be in the moment and stay connected. This is a day about love. This is a day about family, transition, right? Birth. And if I can be in the moment of whatever labor or birth I'm having, I'm going to have a better time of it than, oh, we went off the rails and now it's a disaster. A cesarean birth is not a disaster. An induction is not in any way a disaster. It's just a different path than maybe what your ideal was. But then we just shift to, okay, how do I make this as beautiful and connected and as less scary? How much less scary can I make this thing that probably is scary to you, right? And I would, for my part, I would say preparation helps me to be less scared about something. I think that's true for many of my clients.
Yeah, if we know what lies ahead, what the actual procedures look like, and then the postpartum, it can take, we look behind that screen. Also, I've been having my students just write up a little bit of something like, so if I have a cesarean, I would want, and then I have them fill it in, and, just like thinking about it, and then talking to their care provider, because some might be like, absolutely, we could lower the screen or have a clear screen. And so it just shifts how we perceive it. I love that you mentioned that. Okay, I still have more questions.
I know.
So, because I love this topic.
It's like our lunch. Never have enough time, but all
right, just a few more. So we're talking about, keeping plans, fluid. How do you help somebody that might be pretty attached to their preferences, and you talked about keeping it in the moment, but when you're working with a client and you're getting the sense that, they're like, of course we have plan, B and C, but I really want plan A. So how would you support that person to make it fluid?
Yeah, one is to look at, let's talk through what plan B or C looks like and where there could be beauty in that and what is an important priority. Is it connectedness to your partner? Is it staying focused on the baby? Is it that you actually just need to be, really focused on your relaxation plans, on a guided meditation because it's so scary? How can we minimize that, right? What is the driving force about not wanting those things, but trying to highlight how it can be beautiful in other ways. And I just try to help people understand that, look, no matter what preparation we do, who you hire, who is around you, it's not going to look exactly like you expected. And that can still be beautiful, right? There is no way to know what it's going to look like. And any marriage we have to a very, very didactic idea of what the birth needs to look like is actually going to undermine, to a degree, the experience. I literally had a client who didn't have much early labor, which is great because she didn't spend all day sort of in these early contractions that she didn't have to do anything, but they were kind of driving her crazy. But she had this whole vision for making these cupcakes in her early labor. And she was disappointed during her beautiful labor that hadn't happened. And it was early in my career, and it really helped emphasize for me that in preparation, I want to help people understand that this event is going to be about being in what is, right? We do all this preparation, and then we frankly mostly let it go, and we got to ride the ride we're on, ride the rapids as they're happening, right? This is going to be the labor that you have, and it may not look anything like what you expected, and it can still be magical. And most importantly, it still should be as connected and for you as safe, as minimizing fear and maximizing comfort in whatever that is for you, because I don't expect most people to talk about labor as comfortable, but emotional comfort, right?
And then there's also the people, as you mentioned, second births are very different often than first. And I very much had that myself. And then also as a but I would have went from like 42 hours down to like 3. So it was lovely. But when a second-time parents approaching their subsequent birth, they may have these ideas like, oh, I know what this is. I've been there. But then how they have to approach it could be very different too. Letting go of what they already experienced for the path of, let's see what this baby does.
Yeah, it's such a trap. And the last birth I did, which was a few days ago, was a 4th timer. So my advice is, if you think your second birth is going to be like your first, talk to anyone who's had a few babies, and they'll tell you every birth is different.
Because every baby is different. Every body's different.
Body changed, things changed, and she hired me for her 4th because her 3rd surprised her and was really difficult and went to cesarean after 2 vaginal births, right? So every birth is going to be different and deserves its own preparation. My experience with my second timers, they feel like they know me, or they've done it before. Do we need to even meet? And I'm like, yes, we do, because I promise you have not even thought about this labor yet. And it's true. We sit down and they go, oh, right. It's good you're making us think about this, because that toddler at home is so consuming. Their lives are so consumed. They're not doing any preparation. And we do need to talk about logistics, but we need to also talk about, what are your goals this time? Right? Because if you're like, oh, I loved last time, I want it to be the same, I guarantee it's not going to be the same. But we can take what you loved about that and aim for that, right? So it's just important to take the time, no matter which baby it is, to, again, think about what's ideal for me in this scenario, and how do I prepare for that? How do I make space for that? And also, if it is your second or third, definitely make sure you have spoken with a clinical care provider and understand that it can be so much more rapid than a first labor, and you need to know, when to go if you're going, or call your midwife if you're home, or whatever the rules are. That's important too.
I've had several students very concerned about that. I had a student just last Friday. Her first was about 4 hours, and she's like, "Can I go up to my in-laws? They're about an hour and a half away for Rosh Hashanah," and she was 38 weeks. I'm like, perhaps not.
No. If I were her doula, I wouldn't even be going to Brooklyn. That's how I'm lucky right now. My boyfriend's in Brooklyn. I'm in Manhattan. So when I have a second timer close, I can stay near them usually, right? Because I get that fanatical. But, I wanted to say that, the other fear for second timers, or any rapid labor first, which we don't expect, but it happens, is, will I get my epidural, right? That is a common fear. Will I have time for an epidural? And what I want to just put out there is, if you do not have time for an epidural, that's because the baby is about to be born and you'll be done. And I always joke, the best pain management is being done, right?
Yes.
And I'm not trying to make people avoid epidurals. What I'm trying to say is if you're in a situation where they're saying we don't have time for an epidural, you will not be enduring 2 more hours of labor, right? You will be birthing your baby very soon.
And then you get some good oxytocin going, even more.
So you get a lot of that going, but it can be a little chaotic, but it's because it's going to end very soon that is the circumstance. And I feel like a lot of women are scared it'll be too late and they'll still have hours of labor to do. No, if you have hours of labor, you can have your epidural if you want it, right? So, but
That's a fantastic point. That's a really good point.
An important side, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, you've had many, 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 many years. Let's see, how many? 17, 18 years of being a doula?
17.
17.
Yeah.
Because I remember you started your kind of career as a doula when I started PYC. In fact, you were at our opening party. I found some pictures from back then.
Your childbirth education program. That's all these years we've been partnering.
I know, and you look the exact same, which is amazing. And your many, many, many births. Is there anything that you want to add that I haven't touched on that you really think is important for people to consider when they're putting kind of the picture or pictures, multiple pictures of their birth together?
Yeah, it's another thing I've added lately, and it's just pretty straightforward. It's not all this kind of feeling stuff we've been talking about. I have some clients who have really complicated clinical histories. I have clients that have had long infertility experiences. And keep in mind that when you arrive, if you're birthing in a hospital or birth center, when you arrive, a lot of people are going to talk through your history with you. And for some of my clients, that is not a happy thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is not, it doesn't serve them to go through their history. And for some of my clients, it's not that it's not happy or sad. It's just that they've had 3 surgeries and that they have 2 allergies and how do they react to these? And, things like that. What meds are you on? They need to know. What allergies do you have? How many surgeries have you had and when? What is your reaction to anesthesia? All of these questions that you're going to be asked are not really easy for a laboring woman to deal with. Sometimes they're triggering, sometimes they're just distracting. And so if I have a complicated clinical history, I'm going to request that in addition to the birth plan, I just have a written sheet that says she takes these meds once a day, this much. She's allergic to this, and this is what her reaction is. She had this surgery in 2002, and this, right? She's had this many pregnancies.
That's brilliant. I love that. I can't believe I've never thought of that. That's brilliant.
The staff loves it. Like when the anesthesiologist comes in to do the interview, they're so happy because they know that it's accurate information. They're not like, okay, you have a contraction. I'll ask again. What did you say? Right? He's mumbling, 75 milligrams, right? Like it's not useful. So I have found that really helpful. And especially, like I said, when there's been, losses and things like that, nobody wants to sit there and say, I've had 4 pregnancies and this is my first birth, right? That can be a place where even the partner, in more extreme situations, as soon as someone comes in, I know they're going to ask questions. I have the partner step back out with them and say, here's what's going on, just so you're ready, right? Places where I have clients with abuse history. These things need to be clear to the staff prior to the staff interacting with a woman.
Yeah, because birth is very vulnerable. I mean, you're so open emotionally and physically that if you do have a history, people can approach it in a much more, hopefully everyone's being approached in an empathetic, supportive way, but we also want to know if something's going to trigger someone and really send them into a mentally unsafe place that they can't then relax into birthing.
And my experience is once they know, they're great. But
Yeah.
if they don't, they just lose track that people need introduction. They need to know they're going to be touched, all of that. The other thing is, I don't think we really said this. If we did, we didn't say it really clearly enough.
Mm-hmm.
The laboring woman should not be dealing with any of this advocacy, right? This whole new chapter aside, just everything about birth preferences, everything we've talked about. The person in labor should be allowed to focus only on labor. I want them to have agency, so they're allowed to pop out and pay attention and speak up anytime. They can say, yes, no, I want this, I need this, of course. But in terms of these kind of basic things, hey, we want a delayed cord cutting. We want intermittent monitoring. We don't want that IV. She wants to eat or drink. I really want the laboring person to be safe, to trust that the people around her are taking care of that, because it's just 2 different sides of the brain and it doesn't serve you. If you, again, if you feel unsafe, right? Like my preferences won't be heard unless I speak up about them. As a laboring person, that's really distracting, right? My job as laboring is to labor.
I call that,
So.
I have this image, I don't know where it came from. So I call the birth team the birth posse. And I call it that they circle the wagons, that they enclose the laboring person to do her own thing. And they're creating that space. They're kind of bombarding anyone that doesn't need to get into that space. And like you said, then she can pop out. But yeah, they have to circle the wagons, which is a huge responsibility for the partner. Again, I'll out myself that I'm clearly pro doula, or somebody else that it's a lot for one person. So how many wagons you can get around that person, it's a good thing.
Well, in New York, we're only allowed two, but
two powerful wagons.
Obviously, I believe in someone who is confident about the birth process, who's experienced it, who is comfortable, and then someone who is really intimate, ideally with the person who's in labor. That's a perfect combination, right? Mm-hmm. Because remember, this is a day about oxytocin, about love, about intimacy, about safety. So a family member, a loving partner is really a perfect person to facilitate that aspect of the care. And why doulas are so popular is because we can help with all this other stuff that we're talking about, and partner with the loving partner to then kind of fill in the gaps, right? Really cover both parts of this. One is that whole advocacy, what's going on, what's normal, what does this look like, this is crazy, what are we dealing with clinically, and then of course all the love, intimacy, what is this day about, oxytocin, all of that. So
perfect. All right, we're going to take a super quick break, and when I come back, I'm just going to give you the question. It's, what is one tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents? We'll be right back. Did you know that new babies require changing 10 to 12 times per day? That's 3,500 disposable diapers being added to our landfills by their first birthday. Growing a healthy human doesn't have to be unhealthy for the planet. Assembly is a reusable diapering system that equips families with everything they need to diaper sustainably, from diapers to skincare and laundry. Assembly products are designed and formulated with thoughtful conveniences that strike a balance between minimizing environmental impact while also being a solution that works in the face of real-life parenting. How a family diapers is one small choice among many. Assembly inspires parents to question the way things have been done in the past and empowers them to make choices that have a positive impact on their family, community, and world. And rest assured, if you live in New York City or the Hudson County, New Jersey area and don't have easy access to washer dryers, we've got you covered. Our cloth diaper service Diaper Kind does the laundry for you and delivers fresh, clean cotton diapers to your doorstep every week. Learn more at assemblybaby.com and diaperkind.com. That's ESEMBLYbaby.com and diaperkind.com. And use the code PRENATALPODCAST10 for 10% off your first order.
This podcast is sponsored by Skylight Frame. Mother's Day is almost here. What are you getting her? Something that shows you care. Something that makes her feel loved. Something that won't stress you out. Something like the Skylight Frame. The Skylight Frame is the perfect gift. It's a touchscreen photo frame your whole family can upload photos to, from wherever they are in the world. It's a way to share with her all the moments that matter. It sets up in seconds. You can even make sure that it's already loaded with photos when your mom opens her Mother's Day gift. And her Skylight Frame can hold thousands of the treasured photos you share. It's an easy, heartfelt way for mom to stay connected with those who matter most. It really is the perfect gift. Now, as a special Mother's Day offer for our listeners, get 15% off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/easy. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/easy. Get 15% off your Mother's Day purchase now at skylightframe.com/easy.
Okay, we're back. So,
my question is, what is one tip
or a piece of advice you would like to offer new and expectant parents? We went through many, so.
I mean, I'm going to come back to where we left off, which is, let's remember what the day is about first and foremost, because that's what can transform difficult experiences or keep difficult experiences from being traumatic or disappointing to some degree, is to remember that this day is about love. It is about meeting your baby. It is about transitioning into parenthood. It is about, it can be about gentleness. It's certainly intimate. And sometimes those things feel very difficult to manage when in a hospital environment, particularly a birth center, even at home. It can be difficult because it's unusual and chaotic and all these things. But ultimately, the more we focus on the present and the more we focus on how significant this day is as a meaningful event emotionally, then we can weather whatever we need to weather to meet our baby, I think, that much better. And yes, there are going to be things that are going to be really, really difficult. And I don't expect anyone to manage those like, oh, it doesn't matter because my baby's okay. I'm not talking about that. In fact, I find that really undermining when my clients are expressing their fears and someone just says, oh, but it doesn't matter. You're going to have a baby. It'll be fine. No, it's okay to express those fears. It's okay to be open. It's important to be open. But also being in the moment and remembering connectedness to the baby, to your family member, to whoever is close to you, can soften the blow of these difficulties a great deal. And they can minimize adrenaline, which frankly just gets in the way of everything.
And I know you're not big on social media, but where can people find your work?
My website with my doula partner is laborlove.org, laborlove.org, not anything more than that. I'm Terry Richmond at Gmail. I don't know. They can find me at your beautiful website, I guess. People find me, so it seems to be working out. And what can I say? I let my son do all the social media, and they can find me at laborlove.org.
It actually boggles my mind that you are one of the top New York City doulas and you do so little to get yourself out there. I think it's fantastic.
Listen, I think it's just longevity, right? I mean, I have been around a long time.
Stuck it out.
I've interacted with so many people, and they send me people, right?
And you're also good. You're really, really good. And I'm saying that firsthand because you were at both my births, and you taught me everything I know. I mean, I felt so fortunate that you were my mentor, that I'd be at births, and I could reach out to you. I mean, how amazing was that? So I thank you for the work that you offer the birth world and the support you've offered me and PYC. And yeah, people can always find you through us if they can't find you through your lack of social media.
I'm super lucky. I mean, what an incredible career I've gotten to have and enjoy, and I get as much from it as I put in. And I think, yeah, I'm right for a lot of people, not everybody. And I'm happy that people get comfort from me. And I'm happy to have, of course, been at your amazing labors, but also for the doulas I've mentored, and to know that it's just spreading out and that more people are being nurtured through their births. That is really joyful, because we're not in a time where the healthcare system is doing what we needed to do. So,
no. Well, thank you for your work. All right. I will see you at your house actually in like 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Yes, not everyone's invited, but you are. So.
Thanks, Terry.
Have a good one. Bye.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.